Hey, Omar, how's it going?
Hey, doing good.
Good. Let's get right into it. I'm going to show a clip from the Autonomy Day in 2019 from Elon. So let's watch it, and then we're going to talk about Waymo versus FSD. Here we go.
In the case of Lidar and the March of Nines, isn't there an example? I want to just get to your slam on Lidar because it's pretty clear you don't like Lidar. And this
Lidar's lame. Lidar is lame. Lame.
If that is true, what happens to the rest of the industry that's building their autonomy solutions on Lidar?
They're all going to dump Lidar. That's my prediction. Mark my words.
Omar, 5 years later, Waymo still uses Lidar, doesn't appear to have any plans to stop using Lidar, and is the only commercially available robotaxi service today. Has Waymo beaten Tesla to the punch?
I think Waymo obviously is a pioneer in self-driving. It started as the Google self-driving car project in 2009. And here we are in 2024. They are, I believe, the largest and best driverless service in the world, to the best of my knowledge. And they certainly deserve credit for pioneering the field. But in terms of reaching the finish line on autonomy, getting to a place where you have the technology working across the globe at a cost that's low enough that it can start replacing people's cars. That is, I think, the ultimate definition of success. In that respect, they still have quite a ways to go. I think in the United States, Waymo has about 700 cars. So Tesla has about 6 million cars globally, hundreds of thousands that are running FSD already. When you look at who's going to be the first to the finish line, who's going to be the first to offer you a solution that can really replace your car, replace your driving, I think it's Tesla. In pretty much every metric that matters, Tesla's ahead. For example, 99.7% of the land area of the United States does not have Waymo available. If you're in San Francisco, Phoenix, or Los Angeles, then you may have it available. Otherwise, the best system that you can get is actually Tesla FSD. And so just having something, it can be the difference between life or death. And that's why when you look at the number of crashes prevented, you look at Waymo's safety report, they say we've prevented 48 crashes. They've got a great system, but because its scale is so limited, you're actually seeing far more crashes prevented by Tesla FSD just because of the sheer size of the fleet.
Waymo recently launched a public data hub to show detailed crash comparisons and promote transparency. I'm going to show this data hub on the screen for people. What were your key takeaways from this?
Well, Waymo has really done a lot of work in asking, how should we even pose the question, is an autonomous system safer than a human? It's actually a very complicated question. How do you look at the data? So what is a crash? Is a crash something that's reported to the police? Well, a lot of times people bump into each other in a parking lot and that isn't reported to the police. Is it just something where, someone's injured, they have to go to the hospital? So how do we look at crashes and how do we compare autonomous to human-driven crashes? And how do we make sure we're doing that accurately? So Waymo has prepared some data. They've shared some data publicly here. And obviously they're trying to make the case that they are safer than human drivers. And I think they make the case well. There is legitimately, I think, some safety benefit to having an autonomous car over a human-driven car. That's clear. But obviously, when you look at the national average, Waymo is still crashing more than the average human. And that's because they're operating in dense urban environments. So when you have the national average, that includes a lot of miles driven on the highway where, frankly, there's not a lot you can hit. You could drive off the road and probably still not hit anything if you weren't paying attention. So that really brings up the average miles. So Waymo is really saying, look, you need to actually compare the rates of Waymo in Phoenix to human drivers in Phoenix to get a comparison where you can actually see that we're ahead. So the main takeaway, I think, really is A, there is a demonstrable safety advantage to autonomy, even in this stage where it's relatively primitive compared to what we have today. You really can potentially reduce 80% of injury causing crashes without even, some ultra sophisticated system, just even what we have today, 80%. And that's a starting point. I think we can drive it even further today. You really are looking at something where 90% or more, virtually all injury causing crashes could be eliminated. And I think the second takeaway is really just how you do the comparison, how you look at the data, how you slice the data is insanely complex. And it's really difficult for people to understand. It's hard to wrap their heads around, and it's easy to get caught up in sort of marketing propaganda, which these companies sort of have to do. But how you look at the data and is this car safer than a human is a very, very complex question. So we're really grappling with not only how to answer the question, but even what are the right questions to ask and what are the right things to compare.
Tesla does not have a similar public safety dashboard for FSD. Do you think Tesla should adopt a similar approach to increase trust and provide more transparency?
Well, Tesla does also share their vehicle safety report where they give a rate of crashes on autopilot versus human driven crashes. So, I mean, Tesla kind of pioneered this. They've been doing it for years. Waymo is, also sharing some data on their services, but all of the data they're sharing is sort of, unique to what they're doing. But yeah, I think as Tesla expands their operations, they should provide a lot more data to the public, provide it regularly, and provide it consistently without delay. So certainly there could be some room for them to expand it. I really like what Waymo's done here. It's a nice looking portal. They have some downloads so you can download the file yourself. I think it could be great, especially as FSD is expanding, to have a nice redesigned vehicle safety report and give it a big overhaul. Just to start with breakdowns by country, breakdowns by region, um, records of how many crashes are happening, things like that, where we can see over time how the system is performing. I understand why they don't want to go into too much effort making some crazy extensive report. But I think obviously when you have the public involved, there is a level of public trust having these vehicles on the road. You do want to be transparent. You want to share data openly. And I fully expect Tesla to continue to expand their portal here.
Given that Waymo is a fully autonomous system, while Tesla's FSD requires human supervision, do you think it's even possible to make a valid comparison between the two systems today?
Yes. And the fact is, actually, both of them require human supervision. However, Waymo has a call center where they supervise the vehicles and give them commands. And in Tesla, the person supervising is also just sitting in the driver's seat. So you wouldn't see them just let a Waymo out and go drive on its own without any oversight. That would never be allowed. The parameters are very closely controlled of where it can drive. Extensive testing is done beforehand on that specific location, and it's monitored every step of the way. It won't even go somewhere where it doesn't have good cell service, for example. So, absolutely, there's a lot of things you can compare between the services, and you can just try them for yourself. I use both. I've compared them on cost, on user experience, on their driving ability. And it's very readily apparent if you actually just go try both that Tesla has a solution that's smoother and more lifelike in terms of the driving. That also results in having interventions where the user has to supervise with their end to end learning approach. but the number of miles per critical safety intervention is increasing rapidly. It's doing better and better. And I'm not seeing that level of improvement from Waymo. The quality seems to be more, constant. It's increasing, but increasing at a slower pace. And it seems like Tesla has leapfrogged them in driving feel, and that they're poised to leapfrog them in terms of miles per intervention, especially if you believe some of the numbers that Elon has been throwing out.
That brings me to my next question, actually. Elon recently tweeted in a reply to you, and here's the tweet. FSD will soon exceed 10,000 miles between critical interventions, which is a year of driving for most people, Elon said. How do you interpret this post? What is the definition of soon? And what advice do you give new investors or fans and customers when reading Elon's potentially optimistic posts?
I mean, I just kind of think about it like you're, at a party with Elon or something, and he makes a comment. It's not necessarily like, sacrosanct. I mean, what does 10,000 miles between critical interventions mean? There could be a different rate of critical interventions in different places. In some place, there could be an issue where it's much higher or much lower. So, I mean, he's basically just saying, he's making a pretty benign statement in my mind. It's like saying the sky is blue or the sun will come up tomorrow. For a very long time, we've seen miles per critical safety intervention increase. As they eliminate more problems, it doesn't just increase linearly, like, okay, it's 5, it's 10, it's 15. It's okay, now it understands 3D space much better. It's 5 or 10 times better. Okay, now it's better at handling, bad weather or fog. Okay, now that cuts down on the critical safety interventions by another large factor. So he's kind of just giving a projection of what he's seeing in the software. There are obviously several versions ahead. The FSD 13 that's going to be rolled out this month, they know, how it's performing. And people are commonly reporting, depending on where they live right now, several hundred to even as high as 1,000 miles per critical safety intervention. So is it going to 10x again in FSD 13 and get somewhere closer to a few thousand, maybe 10,000? That seems like it's something that is going to happen, whether it's 13 or 13.2 or 13.3. One thing we can be pretty certain of over time is just looking at miles per intervention. It's continued to get better and better. And I think that at some point, probably within the next few quarters, they will get to 10,000 miles per safety critical intervention. I believe Waymo's test fleet is at 18,000 for the year 2023. So with 10,000, you're within a stone's throw of beginning to start driverless testing.
Can you give some more color detail on the 18,000 figure for Waymo? What does that include? Does it include human interventions, remote interventions?
Yeah, so this is the Waymo test fleet. The California government requires companies that have driverless permits to report interventions. So Waymo has a test fleet and they also have a driverless fleet. A lot of people don't know that 75% of miles driven by Waymo, there's a human behind the wheel, right? So people often like to portray it as all driverless. The reality is 25% is driverless serving passengers and 75% is their test fleet. Just like with Tesla, they're testing new things in their software, trying to make it better, and they need a human behind the wheel to intervene if there's an issue. So roughly every 18,000 miles in 2023, there was an intervention. This is much like a Tesla intervention. This is really an apples to apples comparison with the Tesla interventions, because you have a human behind the wheel and they're taking control when they feel that there's a safety critical issue. Now, this is a Waymo employee who's in the car rather than an average person. But, they're both humans. They both react the same way. The Waymo driver is maybe a little more trained on when to take over and when not to take over, but it's basically about the same thing.
All right, let's get technical now. I'm going to show you a thread that gathered 250,000 views so far. And here it is. This is from Ali. I didn't frankly find it too informative, but one of the dozen tweets in this thread is worth bringing up. And it's this one right here. Waymo's research notes that understanding the why and what of situations in training data is crucial to building such a model, which is only able to identify correlations in the data. They also note that understanding the why of their results makes it easier to improve said system, which is difficult to do in a black box AI model. This is crucial for such a safety critical system. Do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really understand what he's talking about without the context, but I mean, this sounds like kind of a defense. You kind of hear the same thing from Mobileye in terms of why they're not adopting a fully end-to-end system. They say, oh, well, we need to understand why, and it's a black box. And you just try the end-to-end model, and you can see right away how much better it is than a system where we understand why, right? It is just in every criteria people care about performing better. It's smoother, it's more comfortable. You're seeing less interventions compared to the old version. I mean, within a minute of somebody who was on FSD 11 trying FSD 12, you see them say, yeah, this is the future. And yet you have these companies like Waymo and Mobileye kind of pushing back and saying, well, we don't want a black box. But it turns out that when you just kind of train on the human data, there's a lot you can learn that a person would never even think of. I'll just give you one example with FSD 12.5 recently and the 5x larger model. With the old versions of FSD and autopilot, as soon as the light turned green, it would start moving. Just because, that's what you're programmed to do. If light is green, then go. With these latest versions of FSD, it actually pauses and waits for just a fraction of a second to see if the other cars next to you start moving. And only then, when it sees that other people are reacting too, does it also start to go. So why is this important? Well, number one, if you have a red light runner and they're running through the intersection, if you just go right away, you have a greater chance of getting hit by that car. But two, if you detect the color of the traffic light wrong, let's say you detect that the light's hitting the traffic light in a certain way, it looks like it's green when it's really red, and your camera picks that up wrong. Well, now you have a second check of looking at the other cars. All these little things that a human wouldn't necessarily think of, the end-to-end system is able to just encapsulate it just by watching humans and saying, well, humans are doing this. They're not taking off directly as soon as the light turns green. And it's behaving just like a human. And it's very comforting. When a robot is driving like a robot where they understand why, it's very discomforting. It doesn't interact well with the other road users. The proof is just in the pudding. When you try the end-to-end system, it just works better. It is better in pretty much every metric that matters. And you have these companies really trying to defend their approach and saying, well, we need to know why we can't have a black box. But we are able to find why. We're able to understand the training set. We're able to change the training set, how the model is trained, and get the model to behave in ways that we want. So it's not a complete black box. You're understanding it better and better. And I think it's just going to become more and more clear to people that deep learning end to end is the only way to get the results you need for a truly autonomous system, not one that's watched closely and receives remote interventions, but a system that's truly intelligent enough to go wander the earth on its own with no internet connection and never get into a crash.
Thank you. In your opinion, where will FSD and Waymo stand in 3 years?
In 3 years, FSD will still be the largest self-driving system in the world, and Waymo will largely probably have shut down. They may get into licensing or something, but their current robotaxi service clearly is not a working business model. And their deal with Uber shows that they're fundamentally not interested in maintaining a robotaxi fleet themselves. So I think their business is going to look very different in 3 years. Given Google's history of killing products, I wouldn't be surprised if in 3 years, Waymo as a service doesn't exist.
That's a big claim. Wow. All right. Let's switch to politics. Just one question. In your opinion, would a Kamala Harris or Donald Trump presidency positively affect Tesla's and Waymo's robotaxi ambitions?
My view is that regardless of who's president, there will be a massive technological leap forward. All this compute, all these advancements in AI you're seeing, they're going to get us to a place where before we have another presidential election, it's now possible to have an autonomous car that is cheap enough for an ordinary person to buy. So from a tech perspective, we're for sure going to be there before there's another election. Now, I believe both would probably make the right moves from a regulatory perspective to allow for autonomous cars. However, we all know that the Biden-Harris administration and the Democrats don't like Elon. We know that Trump has praised Elon and Elon has supported Trump. There seems to be obviously a much closer relationship there. We've seen things like with the FAA where they're prioritizing, the fish. Oh, are the fish going to be upset by a sonic boom over, the potential survival of the human race if there were to be an extinction event and we needed that space capability sooner rather than later. So, that's kind of what we've seen from this administration is bureaucracy and slowing things down. And let's make sure we follow the proper procedure and do all the environmental reviews rather than, hey, let's make sure that we're accelerating this rocket program so that we can get to the moon and Mars. So probably, I think a Trump administration would be a little bit friendlier to Elon. A Democratic administration might also have some benefits for EVs, but I think the IRA has just the EV tax credit provision of it has been a net negative for EVs as a whole. And I think they've made their feelings about Elon pretty clear.
Thank you. And the final section on the highly anticipated 1010 event. Do you expect Tesla's upcoming 1010 robotaxi unveil Tesla to announce the start of a robotaxi service on 1010, even if it is in a geofenced area?
No, I'm not expecting that. So
what about something like in a year, we might start in this area kind of thing?
In a year is maybe more realistic, but still ambitious. I mean, I think they're getting pretty close. If you're at, 10,000, you probably need to 10x it one more time. So they kind of need to 10x performance twice. They'll get there, but it won't happen as soon as we hope. In the meantime, we do have great supervised driving products that we can enjoy that'll continue getting better. But really, with 10,000 miles per critical intervention, which as a supervised system, most people would have one intervention a year. If you're an autonomous car driving 5 to 10 times more, then that could be, a crash or a safety critical intervention every month or two. So really, Waymo's driverless fleet is about 80,000 miles per critical intervention where they had to go get the car in 2023. So that's kind of the ballpark you want to be in. 20 to 80,000, maybe even 100,000, where you can really scale up a fleet and do it. So I think this is going to be the unveil of the vehicle. They're going to maybe talk about their plans for the service, but unless they've got some secret version of FSD that is dramatically better, we're seeing the best version of FSD ever, but still not Robotaxi level.
Thank you. What role do you expect Optimus to play on 1010?
Well, it's the Wii Robot event, isn't it? Not the Wii Robotaxi event. And I think they're going to show off their vision for the future. I think the vision of Tesla is expanding. Tesla was first started to fix the original sin of the first industrial revolution. In the first industrial revolution, we realized we could automate human labor. We could take machinery, and we came up with the steam engine. We basically would burn fossil fuels, and we could convert that into energy and use machines to do work and do it much faster and more efficiently. But these fossil fuels, we were eventually going to run out of them. They were making air quality horrible and generally making our lives worse in many ways, leading to a lot of premature deaths. And eventually, if you run out of fossil fuels, the whole economy collapses. So we really improved people's quality of life, but there was a catch. The catch was that it wasn't sustainable. So Tesla was started to fix the sins of the first industrial revolution. And in doing so, they inadvertently built up a fleet of millions of cars that began collecting data and training models that know how to navigate the real world. And I think in doing so, they inadvertently are contributing to a new industrial revolution. They're automating intelligence. And it really goes way beyond, cars. I think cars obviously are what people know Tesla for today. It's going to be like Apple and the Macintosh. If you valued Apple just by looking at what their Macintosh sales would be in the future, you'd miss most of what their business is today, which is products that didn't exist. I think Optimus, although it's not a real product today, is the future of the company. And this AI model that can drive our car around with FSD, if it can drive your car around and it can keep you safe on the roads at 80 miles an hour, well, it can't mop your floor. It can't pick up your clothes and put them in the washing machine. Of course, it can't help in the factory. It can. So really, to fully realize the benefits of autonomy, I mean, if you've got a robotaxi, you can drive around, but what about helping people put their suitcase in the car? What about bringing that pizza to the door instead of having to have that person in the apartment walk all the way outside and meet the pizza at the robotaxi? Optimus is a really important part of the equation. As a matter of fact, when you really consider Optimus and taking those AI models that power FSD and taking them to a humanoid robot, most of the value is really in the humanoid portion. The automation of driving, that's just one task out of many that we want to automate. And the more tasks we automate, the more of the economy can be fully automated. You could see a demo, for example, where I think Optimus and the Cybercab are working together to do things that just a Waymo could not do on its own. So the vision is really much broader than rideshare. It's a vision for an entirely new kind of economy.
Thanks, Omar. And final question. In one of our recent Tesla Live spaces, you seemed optimistic about FSD on Tesla Semi. Do you expect Tesla Semi to make an appearance on 1010 in the context of an autonomous fleet system?
No, I don't expect the Tesla Semi to be mentioned at 1010 at all. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe they'll throw it a shout out, but that's not really what the event is about. However, they have started testing FSD on the Tesla Semi. They obviously want to bring basic active safety features to the Tesla Semi, as well as the advanced ADAS features. And that, I think, when you look at what the Tesla network revenue will look like in maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years when it's mature, Tesla Semi will probably make up more than 50% of the revenue of Tesla network. Just because when you look at what the prices of freight shipping are on trucks, it's much higher than what the price per mile is on passenger rideshare in cities. So I think there's a good chance that if they're able to actually bring FSD to the Semi, it could make up more than 50% of the Tesla network's revenue, with a minority coming from passenger rideshare. And then I would think that rideshare in total is less than 20% of probably what the TAM of Optimus is in terms of the types of jobs it could automate. So I think transport is going to be a big chunk, maybe 20 to 40% long term, but it really is just driving. It's one task when these AI models have the potential to automate virtually any economically valuable task a human can do.
Great. Thank you very much, Omar. And I will chat with you tomorrow in Tesla Live.
Cool. See you there.